Call-in show. Yalla.
And we're live. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. This is the Head-On Call-In Show, the first ever call-in show. It's not the first ever time Adam and I hosted together, but we decided after last week that we are going to make this a weekly show. Every single week, we're going to do a call-in show where viewers can hop on, ask us questions, challenge us, share their thoughts, and yeah, just generally have a good time discussing these quite challenging conversations. We're trying something a little bit new today. We're trying to stream this directly into our Discord. Shout out to our Discord community. So give me a moment to just try to figure that out real quick. Cool. Now we got full screen there. I think we're good. Anyways, so thank you for joining. For those in the Discord, if for some reason it's not streaming properly, please ping me so we know. If you want to join the Discord, this is the Head-On community we've been building the past few months, and we're having 8 different conversations, 8 different slots every week for conversations where dozens of people from all over the world are coming in and having these challenging yet productive conversations. So you can find a link for that in the description. And yeah, here we are, Adam. Welcome to your new job. You're now a host of a YouTube show.
Dude, the last one was insane.
You like this?
So last one we were on for what, like 3 hours, a little over 3 hours, just on the YouTube. And then we moved it over to Discord, and that's where it blew up. Right? I think we were just there for easily another 3 hours. And we've just opened so many threads, and it's taken about a week right now just trying to close some of these threads. It's been just to give you like a sense of just like how engaging these conversations have been. Today I wanted to go to the gym, right? And I was on the way there. I didn't have much time, just like 40 minutes. I figured I should go to the gym, but I want to like tune into the Discord and see the conversations taking place, right? So I put it on like my headphones and I was walking to the gym. As soon as I got there, the conversation got so heated and so interesting that I just, for the next 40 minutes, I just stood outside talking and listening and asking questions. And then I did 10 push-ups and went back home. So that's the extent of it. And all of it is, I think, thanks to the previous conversation we had here on the channel. So
yeah, well, that ended up, we ended up from there doing an after party, and you stayed on for like another 3-4 hours on that after party, right? You did like a 5-hour session total.
Yeah, easily 5 hours.
Wild stuff. So it looks like we're not able to stream this through Discord. We need a third person in order for it to work, because we're streaming. Whatever, we'll get it for next week. We're still trying new things, figuring this all out. How's the quality? Am I coming through clear to you?
To me, yeah, I think there were like a couple of glitches earlier, but I think it's fine now.
Okay. For those who don't know, I'm currently in Mexico, so the Wi-Fi is not so consistent. But yeah, so let's get into it. We are closer to a ceasefire deal than we've been since October 7th. Aside from that,
what do we know about the deal? Do you know much about what do we already know about it?
Yeah. What do we know? So it's identical to the deal that's been on the table now for six or so months. The only difference is now Israel is saying they are going to agree to all the terms that they weren't willing to agree to last time. So the kind of what's been happening, you have both parties who are proposing different ceasefire deals, right? And there's many different parts of the ceasefire deal that there's area of disagreement on. But if I'm to simplify it, it really comes down to whether we end the war or not, right? So Israel is agreeing to give back prisoners in exchange for hostages, but they're not willing to then end the war once the hostages are released. Hamas is willing to do the prisoner exchange the same way Israel is, but they're asking for there to be no more fighting once this ceasefire deal is reached. That's generally where the ceasefire has been falling apart the past year plus. So now it looks like Israel is willing to agree to all the terms that they previously didn't. And there's a lot of speculation as to why this might be the case. There's a lot of people who are rightfully very upset about it. And I'll explain why rightfully, but I just want to, for those who know, Shel Ben Ephraim, he's a good, he's a friend. He's been on this program a few times. I'm looking at his Twitter because he's done good reporting on this. So shout out to Shel. Where is it? I would suggest just following him in general to get all the info, but I should have had this pulled up. Anyways, I'll find it. I'll find it in a few moments, but essentially what it comes down to is Israel leaving the Philadelphia corridor, letting Gazans return to the north, and a cessation of fire for at least 30 days. Then we enter phase 2 of the deal, where another some other amount of hostages are meant to be released if neither party breaks the ceasefire deal. The way Netanyahu is selling this to the public currently, because he's getting a lot of backlash for agreeing to this. It's seen as like a major loss on his part. Hamas will continue to stay in power. They're not going to be defeated. We're still not going to get all the hostages back. So how is he actually framing this? He's framing this as, we don't need to continue to phase 2. Let's just get these next 30 hostages back, and then we'll continue fighting. Let's at least get them home. That's how he's framing it. Now, why is he all of a sudden willing to accept this deal where 6 months ago he didn't? And 6 months ago we could have gotten them out with more hostages alive, less dead civilians, and less dead soldiers, right? Same deal is being accepted now after 6 more months of bloodshed. Why now? It seems the main reason is pressure from Trump. This is Trump's doing. He's putting immense pressure on Netanyahu to accept this deal. Now, a lot of people who are pro-Israel are also MAGA, and we're seeing some either major cognitive dissonance, which I'll explain in a moment, or people are just very upset at Trump. They feel like he's turned on them. Other people are kind of framing it like there's things we don't know. Trump is pressuring Netanyahu to do this, but he very well may have promised him annexation and whatnot. So there might be, it might be part of a greater deal. So there's 4D chess at play. Let's wait and see. That's one of the narratives I'm seeing. Others are just saying that Trump betrayed them. And then the third is really just dissonance, where I'm seeing people say the U.S. is pressuring Israel into accepting a horrible deal. So it's the U.S., it's not Trump. But if it was something positive, obviously Trump would be the one to get credit, right? But when they don't like it, then let's just blame the U.S. administration. Now,
what kind of pressure, Adar? Do you have a sense of what is the pressure? What could Trump be doing behind the scenes if it is Trump?
Yeah. Well, we know it's Trump because he sent an envoy to the negotiations for the purpose of making sure it gets done. And then he was on an interview. On a news interview, he said, yeah, we're making this happen. We're going to get it done. Trump's personally taking credit for it. But sorry, what's your question?
What does it mean, pressure? What does he say? Yeah. What does the envoy say? What's going on?
So, yeah, I don't know. It could be in the form of a threat, if you don't do this, then they'll, we'll withhold funding. It could be, look, do this and we'll give you X, Y, Z, right? I'm not sure.
You think it's probably both carrot and stick?
I think it's a little bit of both, probably. Yeah. So, and why are people upset? There's a lot of people who are upset about this, and the way it's being framed is they're upset. It's because they just want the bloodshed to continue, but I don't think that's really an accurate framing. Those who want the war to continue want to because they genuinely believe that there's a clear path to defeating Hamas, and all we need to do is try a little bit harder, use a little bit more force, and we will defeat them once and for all. Now, the reason why many people believe this is because this has been a prevailing narrative from day one. Many in the kind of pro-war camp have been promoting this. They will be destroyed. 80% of their battalions are already destroyed. For a year now, there's been a narrative that they're on the verge of collapse. This has been a false narrative the entire time. This could have very well been predicted by many. We've spoken about this on many occasions on stream, that Hamas most likely will not be defeated militarily. This was predictable on October 7th. It didn't require 15 months of fighting to know this. But there was this narrative that they will be defeated and we just need to fight. So if you in your mind have been expecting Hamas collapse for now over a year, and now you're finding out that in reality they're going to stay in power, then that's going to be very hard for you to accept. So I think many in the pro-Israel camp who are struggling with the ceasefire deal, a lot of it is coming down to the fact that A, they don't want them to be in power, and that's understandable, and B, they actually had an expectation that they wouldn't be in power.
Adar, I think that there's a couple of other options here, and I already see Callistos asking in the chat, so I want to refer to that. But before then, what do you make of the argument? Because I remember just like a few months ago, people would say, yeah, Bibi is just holding on until Trump is in power because Trump will then let him do whatever he wants to do. You see like it essentially turning one, like where has that argument gone? I'm not hearing any. Do you hear enough frustration from the people who used to make an argument like this, or did it just disappear?
No, so that's a lot of the frustration is kind of seeing like a change in tune on Trump's part. Even around a week ago, there was a video of him saying, if the hostages aren't released by the time I take office, all hell will break loose. It seemed like a threat. It sounds like that was a threat towards Netanyahu and not Hamas.
I think he said Middle East, right? He didn't say Palestinians. All hell will break loose in Gaza. I think Middle East kind of kept it vague potentially.
He kept it vague.
Yeah.
And yeah, is it possible, like we could speculate all day, but it's possible that Trump has insiders that let him know that they're not actually going to be defeated militarily, that it's like a Taliban 2.0 kind of thing, and that if we want to get the hostages back, and because I think Trump has a greater vision to, accomplish normalization with Saudi Arabia. Well, that's not going to happen until we have a ceasefire here. So he very well might be saying, swallow your pride, cut your losses, get the hostages home. Let's move on. Which, I'm not
Adar,
much.
What do you think?
But I think that's the right move, and I think that should have been our move on October 8th. Even.
So that is unlikely to be the move that probably all Israelis stand behind, right?
Right.
I don't even know if most Israelis, certainly a large swath of Israelis, would probably say that. Probably not in the same way that you just said it, right? Where we should have done this October 8th. I don't know many Israelis that say we should have done that on October 8th. But
right.
Let's say most would say that we should have done that months ago. Fine. What do you think are the lessons that are likely to be drawn by Israelis from this entire saga? Callistos here is saying, did Israel take too long to take over Gaza? Is that one of the takeaways that you think Israelis will walk away with?
Yeah, so real quick on the sentiment amongst the Israeli public. For months now, the polling has shown that the majority, 65+% of Israelis support ending the war in exchange for getting the hostages back. I do imagine now that the details of the deal have come out, I think you'll have more that support rejecting it, but we very well may still be in the majority of Israelis supporting this new deal. There's no polling on that yet. In terms of what Israelis take away from it, unfortunately, I am not confident that they're going to take what I believe to be the most important lesson, and that's the only way to achieve security is through peace, and the status quo is not sustainable. That's the message I'd like Israelis to come away with, but I can see this just adding to the despair, saying we can't have peace. There's nothing we could do. Like I saw somebody tweet the other day, and she's generally open-minded and a nuanced thinker, and she said, yeah, I support the hostages deal because I don't think we could defeat Hamas, but I don't think they'll ever change. We'll just never have peace, right? I think that is actually a prevailing narrative before October 7th, and I think it's going to be even strengthened now. It very well may require like very strong leadership to break people out of that mindset of despair, which is really disempowering. What do you think on that matter, though?
I unfortunately hear expansionist, annexationist, incredibly aggressive kind of rhetoric coming from even people who are, would pre October 7th would have been much more open to dialogue and conversation.
Right.
And that's the. I fear that that would be the main takeaway. The main takeaway being, we pulled out of Gaza. This is what you got. Okay. Therefore, we should never have pulled out. Therefore, we should settle. If we settle Gaza, well, then maybe we won't have rockets. That would be like one of the, or it could just be much more messianic too. Didn't this teach you that the entire conception of Oslo and is leading you to a abyss? The entire world is turning on you. You don't understand that really what you need is to go back to your roots, to go back to your true identity, to Judaism proper. And therefore, right? So I'm sure we're going to hear this song being played everywhere.
Right.
And we need to have very good, I don't know what kinds of, we have to try to spread a different type of lesson for Israelis to draw. But it's probably unhelpful that their memory of October 7th is so riddled with gruesome atrocities. You know what I mean? Like if October 7th would be a little less gruesome in their mind, it might have opened them up to a different type of takeaway. So I don't know how you deal with that kind of trauma now, like a trauma in memory.
Right.
Do you have some ideas about that?
We're two very traumatized populations. That really puts us at a disadvantage towards being able to empathize with the other side, understand the other side, communicate effectively with the other side, right? So there's this challenge that those who are closest to a conflict often have the hardest time seeing the other side in a way that's needed to find a solution. So healing trauma is a decade-long process. It's not something that just happens. So I don't know if we can rely on people doing the work in order for us to get this peace process underway. I think us doing the work to heal the trauma is going to be a necessary part of it, but it doesn't need to start there. And I think that if we really have leadership that is inspiring and that can sell an inspiring vision of peace on the land to the people, then I think that's how you can rally people, because people can be convinced that peace is possible, just no one's making a compelling case. At least not our leadership. They're not making a compelling case. They're not making any case that peace is possible. They're reinforcing the fact that it's not possible.
Adar, have you heard about the arguments people make about the voluntary dilution of the Gazan population, where it's like voluntary emigration? You tell them if you want to leave, right? And then you have different reports. Some people saying, "Oh, yeah, there aren't even a million Gazans in Gaza right now," right? Like this is kind of how they think about it. Some people say that there's fewer than a million, and really you just need to, just give half of them visas to the U.S. or Europe or whatever, and you're done with it. They're gonna hop on the ship and leave immediately.
Right.
I hear more and more of that. How much leverage and how much traction do you think ideas like this are likely to have?
I mean, if Gazans want to leave Gaza, I mean, that should be their right to do so. But to create conditions on the ground that incentivize them to leave is inhumane.
No, to reward them to leave, not to create inhospitable. I don't know if you can make it any more inhospitable, right? But now to create incentives.
I mean, again, that sounds like two consenting adults agreeing to something. I'm not gonna get too worked up about that. They're being compensated. It's consensual. You're not coercing them. You're not forcing them or harming them. Do I think that'll be an effective strategy? No, but I'm not. If somebody wants to give that an attempt, like by all means, give it a shot.
What do you make of settlements in Gaza?
I envision a future where Jews can live on every piece of land from the river to the sea, as well as Palestinians, but I don't think that we should attempt to do that until we have peace. So currently, for settlers to live in the West Bank and Gaza requires security. Security to them is inherently oppressive. Security in its current form. So they've struggled to accept us being sovereign on this land, which is understandable. To think that the way they're going to one day accept us is to just keep taking land, keep doing the same thing that in their mind started this whole thing, just doesn't seem like a rational or, and certainly not a humanist way to go about it. So I want Jews to be able to live in Gaza, but once we have a peace agreement. Yeah.
Gandalf is responding. Gandalf, I hope it's clear. I'm not saying that I think you can pay them to leave, right? I do believe, though, that is an increasingly prevalent perspective.
Yeah.
Although I also don't have the data on that. I don't really know. But speaking of data, okay, so Gandalf says, no, that's insane, Adam. An Arab, a Palestinian, you can't buy that. It's honor for them, culture, history. I do believe that is very likely true. I also hear, however, that data and polling take a slightly different perspective on this. I think that, what was it, like a third of Palestinian adults in Gaza would say that if they had the chance, they would leave. Some incredibly high numbers. I remember that before the war started. So I don't really know how to reconcile.
I mean, let's say that Israel can successfully incentivize half of Gazans to leave, which I think even that is not realistic. But let's say, okay, so you have 1 million Gazans. You still need to either give them a state or make them citizens. It doesn't. And what you could say is it makes it easier to make them citizens because you don't face as large of a demographic concern. So if your plan is to offer full citizenship to all people living on the land, then I could see it being strategic to first incentivize people to leave and then to offer that citizenship. If you're going to incentivize them to leave and then just continue to, maintain military presence on their land without giving them a path to citizenship and a path to statehood, then it's just not, we've done nothing. So we dropped the link if anybody wants to hop on.
Yeah, I
Gandalf Potter, Mr. Potter says, I blame Adar for refusing to set the goal of being a prime minister. There, I said it. I don't think I'm cut out for that role. I think I hope I can continue to do these conversations and inspire and have some amount of impact to the point where it could actually change the reality on the ground, where the will of the people has been impacted and even the decisions of the prime minister has been impacted by some of these conversations. That would be an amazing honor. But I don't know if I'd.
And right now, inspiring the next generation of AI.
But I appreciate you holding me in high regard like that. I appreciate that. What's that, Adam?
Now inspiring not just people and perhaps future politicians, but maybe a future species of AI.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. So Muhammad's saying that he feels like it's not voluntary and to consenting adults. It's just forcing them out. But it's not forcing them out if you're saying you can stay if you want to. If you leave, you'll get a compensation package.
Yeah.
You can make the case that there's like a disparity of power, therefore it can be seen as coercion. Like I hear that argument, but it's not forcing. It's not the same as forcing them out. It's fundamentally different because if you want to, you could stay, right? So you're not forcing anybody. But I agree, it's not. There's a power dynamic that makes it not as simple as two consenting adults. I do agree.
Adar, what do you make of like how what is likely to be the sentiment of, and if there's any Gazan who's watching or even Palestinians from elsewhere who can tell us kind of like what the mood is in reaction to a ceasefire. I'm very curious about, like, do you think Israelis walk away thinking, oh my God, we won this war. Wow, what a victory. or do they come back thinking that's not that was a disaster for us? And how are Palestinians likely to interpret this? Right, I already saw on the Discord people saying, "Okay, great, we won." You see all these parties and parades and stuff happening. I think I saw stuff in Gaza. I have a friend. He received a bunch of photos from celebrations in the West Bank. Speaking of the baklawas, handing out baklawas.
Right.
What do you make of the different kind of like tenor and texture and like sentiment around how this is likely to be taken?
I will say this. I think it's pretty common for all warring parties to frame it as if they're victorious, right? Like, did the U.S. win the Vietnam War? Or did they lose it? Right? There's like countless examples where both parties at least tell their people that they're victorious, and part of that is for morale. For the morale of the people, the morale of the nation. So I think it's very natural for them to walk away feeling like they got a victory. What is the victory? Us leaving, us not staying forever. I'm not sure what the actual victory is. I mean, Gaza. At the end of the day, we both lost. Neither of us won. We both lost this war, and that's how we should both remember it. We should recognize that the past 15 months of violence was not a necessity. It was a choice that only sees losers and not winners. I think that's healthy framing.
Yeah, but Adar, for the less healthy framing, but maybe more like popular one. Yeah. Do you think that Gazans and maybe other Palestinians and others around the world might think that Israel was intent on genociding all of them and then failed at doing it, in which case that is a form of success?
Correct. So I think you hit the nail on the head. If you genuinely believe that Israel's goal was to resettle Gaza or to just exterminate the entire population or displace the entire population, then in that sense, it's a complete victory that they succeeded to we didn't displace them. We're not resettling Gaza. Doesn't seem like we are, right? So in that sense, they won. But I don't think that was ever the intention. The ones who could claim that they're winners, right? Hamas can claim personally that they're winners if they get to stay in power, right? They're winners in the sense that they're still in power. They're losers in the sense that they invited in so much death and destruction. But I'm not sure how the Palestinian people frame this as if they're winners. Again, unless they're part of that same narrative that they're gone, therefore we won. If they were here, we'd lose. They're gone, we won. But I mean, look at the cost,
Yeah, I'd be curious if there are folks in the chat that can speak about the Palestinian perspective there. I mean, I suppose Israelis could. What's that?
Hopefully, we have somebody hop on. We dropped
on, I suspect that if Israelis could Israelis spin it in the same way? Well, look, Hamas tried to invade us on October 7th and to kill all of us.
We could spin it into a win. Yeah, we killed their leadership. We took a massive blow to Hezbollah, Syria. Netanyahu is he's gonna give some speech and he's gonna mention all this stuff and how it's just a massive victory. But both sides are gonna do victory rallies. They're gonna pretend like this was a clear, decisive victory. Where in reality we're all weaker because of it. Israel is weaker today than they were October 6, 2023, and so is Hamas by significantly.
Yeah, I wonder because I remember speaking to a friend of mine from Gaza who said, "Oh, once the war is over, we're going to rename a city in the Strip October 7th." in honor of the bravery and courage and all of our accomplishments on October 7th. How do you think the memory of it will age in Palestinian society?
think it depends what comes next. If this returns to the status quo and there's no change, then I think it decreases the chance that it's remembered in good light. If it leads to something positive, then it's much more likely that it will be remembered as the right decision. And I will say this, even if you are supportive of October 7th, Gazans are so tired of this war that they want it to end. Like you could both support October 7th and not want them to do that again. Right now, if you don't have skin in the game, if you're just some outsider hoping that Israel falls one day, then you don't take on much of a cost for another October 7th. But Gazans, even though they see it as like a boost to their morale, they're not going to be so quick to want to reinvite Israel in like that. So,
Adar, I see the chat teeming with thoughts about Bibi and him actually being the victor here. And
Callistos,
what do you make of that?
Adar, do you think Netanyahu accomplished his political objective for getting reelected? I think he's pretty close. I'm not sure it's a clear victory. I think a lot of it comes down to what happens over the next few months with Trump. That could either push him over or not. I do think if we go to elections tomorrow, I don't think he can build a coalition. I'm not sure the opposition will either. We might just be in this stalemate again. Floodland is asking, so your business partner will co-host every stream? Oh, Adam already responded. Just the Wednesday ones, exactly. Every Wednesday we're going to do a stream together, but there still will be some solo streams. There'll still be some group conversations. We're going to mix it up. Do we want to add Al in here? We have Al in the waiting room.
We have Alan in the waiting room. Yalla.
Let's do it.
Welcome.
Al, what's going on, man?
What's up, guys? Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Yeah, I was just going to respond to that. You know, if there's any winners, I think both sides definitely lost. I don't think there's no winners here in this ceasefire, you know, or who's the winner.
True. Yeah.
But if I had to say who's the bigger loser, I mean, you got to say, is Gaza better off, you know, since the ceasefire than before October 6th? And I would say, no, they're not better off. So even though both sides lost, I think Hamas lost a lot more because they're, you know, Gaza is in ruins. They're not better off than before October 7th. So I'm not sure exactly what they accomplished.
You're saying that they are worse off than Israel is worse off, because I imagine you would also think Israel is worse off now.
Oh yeah, Israel's also worse off.
Yeah, you just think that Gaza is more worse off than Israel.
Who's more worse off?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah,
I mean, I would say in terms of just the death and destruction, I think there's no question. In terms of like being closer to achieving our long-term political goals, I think it's debatable of who's better off. Did this like reignite the Palestinian liberation movement on a global scale that will ultimately lead to Palestinians having a state? If that's true, I would actually say if it leads to peace, then both sides won. But like, it might not be a victory. It might not lead to like Netanyahu's vision of the country, which is to maintain the status quo and slowly expand and not really need to deal with the situation. This might force our leadership to need to deal with the situation.
I think it might force both sides to reconsider and you know, and try to go for peace. I think both sides are going to be tired after this, or are tired. So I wouldn't be surprised if something positive comes out of this, to be honest with you.
You would be, or you wouldn't be?
I wouldn't be surprised.
Oh, no, yeah, me neither. I think there's a pretty decent chance that some good comes of this.
Maybe really in the next 5 to 10 years, I would not be surprised if something good comes out of it. Just like after the 73 war, you know, Egypt signed a peace deal. So
yeah, Adam, wait, do you see something good coming out? Or you have a question?
Yeah, no, I want to understand kind of like the mechanism here that will allow good to come out. Like, do you think that if Hamas remains in power, they'll be able to what? Sell a different vision to the
I don't think they can remain in power.
Okay, so that's one thing I see in the chat. People are saying that it remains to be seen if Hamas is going to remain, is going to benefit politically, which I guess some people are open to the possibility that they might. You don't see that possibility coming out?
I don't know if the word on the street is true or not, but I saw, that I was reading that a lot of people in Gaza are angry at Hamas. They're not happy with what's going on. They're angry at them for what they did and what, how their lives are because of them. I don't know how true that is, but if that is true, then they might be able to be the catalyst to, I don't know, do something with Hamas, push him out or whatever, vote him out, whatever they can do over there,
You think you might see Gazan society upturning in some way?
I just like to put myself in people's shoes. And if I was in Gaza, yes, my life was terrible, but it's nothing compared to what it is now. You know what I mean? It's like 20 times as worse. So
Gandalf is saying, but even if it's true that Hamas got them there through some missteps or whatever, isn't it also true that they are probably angrier at Israel? And therefore they might still side with somebody like Hamas if they are...
Well, like I said,
more
I put myself in that situation. I mean, I'm a human as well. I mean, you're a human. I mean, would you try to do something again like that where you saw the outcome, or would you try a different path?
So people might support Hamas and still believe that, tactically speaking, October 7th itself was, like a misstep. Or they could say that even if it was a good bet, they just happened to land on an Israeli government that is particularly intransigent and stubborn and doesn't care about hostages. And so the next government might be different. It's just that this government is particularly irrational, and it is not at all Hamas's fault. So I feel like people who support Hamas could also find some ways to kind of to remain correct in their mind, or they might still feel some type of frustration, but not enough to actually do anything about it. I mean, in the same way that I mean, I don't know. What do you guys think are likely to be the consequences to the IDF? Oh, what happened?
Oh, we lost Al.
We lost Al.
Maybe he got disconnected.
Maybe he'll.
What do you think?
Yeah, you want to do some chat?
Well, I wanted to read. I said at the beginning I would read off what Shael mentioned in his tweet.
Oh, you found it?
Yeah. So the tweet reads: Israel has capitulated on several factors, allowing for a deal to be reached. Israel has agreed to withdraw fully from Gaza, leaving no troops or security zone. That includes a full withdrawal from Philadelphia corridor. It has agreed to allow Hamas to rule Gaza. That is not in the agreement, but there's also no mechanism to remove Hamas. Israel has agreed not to exile or release prisoners, but rather let them into Gaza again. Israel has waived its demand for a list of live hostages. It has agreed to allow residents to return to northern Gaza with only symbolic security measures. Israel agreed to accept dead bodies in the first stage. All of these were red lines for Israel at one point. It is remarkable that all of them are being waived. So in that sense, it's being seen as a big victory, at least in terms of the capitulation on some terms.
Adar, can you pull this up? Can you share your screen? Yeah.
Oh, Al's back. Welcome back, Al.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know what happened.
Oh, good. Here, hold on. There we go. We have it up.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah, I actually lost audio and I couldn't hear the last 30, 40 seconds of what Adam was saying, and then I got kicked off.
Yeah. So, well, I think I remember my question to you, but let's read this post real quick about the ceasefire, and then we can come back to it. So Israel has capitulated on several factors, allowing for a deal to be reached. So Israel has agreed to withdraw fully from Gaza, leaving no troops or security zone. That includes full withdrawal from the Philadelphia corridor.
Is that 100%? Is that real post?
Yeah, is that real? Yeah,
Yeah. These are the terms of the deal.
Okay.
These are the current terms of the deal.
I'm
And
surprised.
How do you know that? Yeah.
What's up?
How do you know? How do you know
I
that
mean,
this is true?
the guy that, yeah, because he started saying Israel has capitulated, so that already makes me question whether that's a true post,
Oh yeah, capitulated because they had the same deal in June and Israel didn't agree to any of these. So this is based on knowing what Israel agreed to in the past. So how do I know this is real? Well,
Yeah.
I trust Shale, and the way he reports is he's literally taking what's being reported out of the hostage negotiation. So this doesn't require inside information. This is him reading the publicly available information and summarizing it. Now, I will put it out there. This is not good practice if you don't trust the person you're reading it. There's a lot of misinformation, but it's very helpful if there's a few people in this world who that if they're going to report on something, that they did the work, because we have a limited amount of time. So I can't do all this research myself, but I do know Shael does the research. If he makes a mistake, he makes a public correction. So he's somebody who I just trust. So this is the official.
Okay, so first we're
But
saying.
do you want to find this in media form? Like, do you want to find an actual article?
Yeah, I have a couple of other links that I saw.
Okay.
But let me see.
Has Israel released an official comment on the ceasefire deal?
Yeah,
maybe.
I want to read Shell's last line because I think it's interesting. The reason this happened is clear. Despite incredible victories on the battlefield, Israel has not offered a political program to replace Hamas or to remove them from Gaza as a governing force. It has failed to translate idea of gains into political ones. That has, in essence, nullified all of its military achievements. It's an interesting analysis, right? So we spoke about like truth telling. The first part is Shael literally reporting. When he reports, I at this point trust him blindly, but he gives an analysis that shouldn't be trusted blindly. That's an opinion, right? So when it comes to opinions, always have an open mind. When it comes to like gathering information, have those sources that you trust, and it just saves you a whole bunch of time. Anyways, we do have Abed here. Abed, can you give yourself either turn your camera on or give yourself a thumbnail, and then we'll add you on. Anyways, what Adam, you were saying something?
Yeah. Do you think that there was? Well, I had a question for Al.
Yeah.
But now I have in mind the terms of the ceasefire, as far as we read them. So, do you think that? So you're talking about how much the Palestinians have lost and how much the Gazans have lost in terms of destruction and lives. Do you think that? What do you think the implications will be for the IDF? So Israeli society seems to think that October 7th is just a major fuck up, right? Some people think there's like some conspiracy going on, but most people, regardless, think that there's some degree of oversight. It's not entirely clear how to explain the either incompetence or just the complete failure on October 7th. So while you do see some pushback to Netanyahu today in the streets with protests and that sort of thing, and it's not like he was always very popular, even before, right? We had like a year of protests leading up to October 7th. What do you think about almost like the status, almost the mythical status of the Israeli army in Israeli society? And will their picture, if you have a sense, like their picture of like the army and its strength and its intelligence, be able to recover? It's a different type of destruction, but is there like a destruction in the like respect and status of Israeli institutions after this war?
I don't know. I mean, I don't live in Israel. I'm in the U.S., I don't know how they feel about that. I would think that nobody is immortal and perfect. Mistakes happen, intelligence failures happen. We lost a lot of soldiers. I mean, I don't know how they would feel. I think what other alternative is there? It's the IDF, it's the Israeli Defense Force. So I'm sure they're going to support them. It's not like
Adar,
Vietnam, when the soldiers came back, people were disrespecting them and spitting
right.
at them, because it's completely different. This is the IDF to them. That's their defense force, the only force that protects them. So they failed, but it is what it is.
Adar, do you have a take on that?
On the sense in Israeli society that we're invincible.
Invincible, and you know what? How about this? Maybe perhaps a more crushing rupturing of the bubble. What do you think of the Israeli perspective that the IDF is the most moral army? Do you think that coming out of this war, that impression will have been bolstered or will have crashed?
Do you sense that those saying Israel's the most moral army is actual Israelis and not just American supporters of Israel?
Israelis.
I haven't heard that narrative in Hebrew so much. It's a very common Hasbara narrative we hear online.
I think it's very Israeli. Yeah.
I don't think that's going to shift unless whoever the next prime minister is really turns on Bibi, and because the Israeli public's not ready to criticize the IDF. They're held in too high regard. They're the protectors. We don't criticize them. So Israelis are not going to be open to hearing the extent of war crimes that were committed or just the destruction in Gaza. They're going to be quite closed to that. But is it possible that the next prime minister says, let's just throw Bibi under the bus? He already has ICC arrest warrant. It's not the army that fucked up. It's Bibi. He was in charge and he was just careless. And now he harmed the reputation of our military because of his recklessness. And that's not entirely honest, because there is a deeper systemic issue leading to a lot of these excesses that are not related to Netanyahu. But that is a path I can see that gets the Israeli public to acknowledge that the war was not fought well. In terms of Israel's confidence in their military, I think it's actually it will be very healthy for Israelis if they're somewhat humbled by this whole situation and they recognize the limitation of the IDF. Because if you believe that your military is invincible, then you don't believe that you need to actually work towards peace, because you'll just continue to defend yourself. If Israelis can accept that their only path to true security is through peace, then I think we're in a better place. Will that happen? I'm not convinced, but I could see that.
Yeah, I think the narratives that run counter to it are that, well, look, if you give Gazans 50,000 visas, to come and work and improve their lives and their economic well-being, really what they're going to do is exploit these opportunities to learn all the secrets of where the kibbutz keeps their weapons, and then to go and kill those same families that had employed them previously. Mm-hmm. I think that is more likely to be the kind of narrative that goes viral.
I agree.
I have a quick question, Adar.
But just real quick, Al, but that narrative could be the prevailing one, yet that doesn't mean we leave there with a sense of confidence in the IDF and their ability to solve all our problems. So I think it would be very, even if we don't have the best takeaway and says we'll continue to live by the sword, it's not realistic to think that Israelis are going to leave this super dedicated towards the peace process. I would say that is highly unrealistic to expect. But is it possible that there's less that feel like we could continue to live by the sword for eternity? I think that very well may be the case, and I think that's good for Israelis to come to terms with.
Yeah, my quick question was regarding the failures of October 7th. I just came to mind. How much of that do you attribute to it being a holiday? Like during the Yom Kippur War, obviously it was Yom Kippur. I don't know what kind of crews they have, if they have a full crew at the defense line, or is it like a skeleton crew? And same thing here, they attack during a holiday time. Does that factor into it? Is there like a skeleton crew defending, or is it still a full crew?
I don't think it has all too much to do with the holiday. I think we were just unprepared. So there was only one battalion on the Gaza border during the attack. A week before, there were 3 battalions. those 2 battalions left from Gaza to the West Bank because there was tensions rising there. Now, there was a fair bit of intel warning of October 7th. And I understand why the intel wasn't taken seriously, because you get intel reports all the time, and we had 2 years of relative quiet with Hamas. We didn't think that they would, after 2 years, try this surprise attack on us. And then I imagine we thought, even if they try, we will defend ourselves. So it was kind of this arrogance that let them try, we got this. But at the end of the day, we had 1 brigade instead of 3, or instead of even 5. We were not prepared for the attack despite having warnings. So I don't attribute it all too much to the holiday. It's just general lack of preparedness, especially given the fact that there was intel that this may happen.
But what is the official protocol when it's a holiday? Is it like the same strength, or do they say, okay, go ahead, take a day off or whatever, or are a little lax when it's a holiday? Official protocol.
Well, there's going to be like vital. There's certain things that are not going to change at all, like guarding certain checkpoints and certain bases. There's no difference in that from holiday to not. What you might see, because you want to give soldiers the day off, you might not see as much patrolling, right? You won't have active patrols.
Right.
But in terms of like the guarding, that's generally not going to change.
I'm curious, just because we brought this up. Adar and Al, do you guys think that the claim that Israel is a moral army, let alone the most moral army, but a moral army, is that just a Hasbara talking point? What do you make of it?
Can I go first, or Adar?
Yeah. And we're going to bring Abed on as well. Abed, welcome. We'll give you an opportunity to speak in a few moments.
I think there's I don't know how to explain this, but there's the theory and then there's the execution, right? In theory, I mean, what other army, drops leaflets and sends text messages and lets people know, get out of here, whatever, in theory? I don't know of any army. But in execution, I mean, if there's still, innocent people dying, and, a lot of them, does that still, you see what I mean? Does that still matter? If you're trying, but it's not working, or is it just a cover? Are you just sending these texts as a cover and then doing whatever you got to do anyways? So I don't know how to answer that question. I think in theory, they are the most moral army because they're doing all these things. Whether it's effective or not, that's a different story. So unless you can give me another army that does this, sends leaflets and text messages.
I will say the leaflets and the text messages, there have been other armies that have done that, but I don't think it's a good example, because the reason why Israel does that more than other armies is because you only drop leaflets and text messages if it's a home that is occupied by civilians and not militants. If there's militants, you don't want to let them know you're going to attack. You want to attack the militants while they're there.
Definitely.
Most other countries don't have a policy of destroying massive amounts of civilian infrastructure. This is unique to Israel. So because Israel has an excess of destruction of civilian infrastructure, they have a policy in place to reduce civilian harm. But I don't think Israel deserves all too much credit. That's a policy which is a result of an increase of excessive force compared to other armies. Now, to expand on that, I don't really know what it means, like a moral army. I'm not sure what that actually looks like. Do I think that there's the IDF as acting as the protector of Jews living on the land? I think that's moral, but I think it's immoral to maintain an unsustainable, immoral status quo in the West Bank, for example. So in that instance, I think it's engaging in something that is not necessary for protection. It's an immoral action. What we're doing in Gaza, I view to be immoral actions. So in terms of the purpose of the army, defense, great, that's moral. In terms of the day-to-day actions, not only do I think Israel is not the most moral, I think it's today one of the least moral armies in the world, because most armies in the world are not engaged in harming.
Wait, well, that's not.
No, why?
But both ways. I mean, a lot of armies don't have to fight in an urban warfare,
Correct. But so how can we compare them to us? They're just not. there's no consideration. How do you even argue that?
Well, no, you
Well,
can't
I mean,
make
I
that-
look at. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, please.
I mean, I'm looking at Ukraine, for example. And Russia bombs a hospital or kills civilians. I mean, they don't care about sending leaflets and all that stuff.
So I actually think Russia is more moral than Israel after the past year. I say that with a high degree of confidence. Russia did not kill nearly the same degree of civilians and did not do nearly the same damage to civilian infrastructure. Not even close. And again, it's different combat. But what metric do you want to measure and say Russia's worse? I'll tell you why they're worse. They're worse because they literally are invading another country trying to take their land. They weren't attacked by Ukraine, and their invasion is right. But in that sense, but in terms of like the soldiers and how they're executing, actually, I would say another area. I think that we saw an excessive war crime of sexual violence amongst Russian soldiers, which we did not see nearly the same extent in Israeli soldiers, right? So if we want to judge the morality of like individual soldiers and the crimes they're engaging in, I think there's some difference there and some things that are certainly worse about Russia. But in terms of like the carrying out a tactical operation and the regard you give civilians, I don't think there's a case that Russia is worse than Israel.
You have to remember, they may take it easy on them as well because it's the same people. It's fellow Russians in that area.
Oh no, so I think that's key. What you're describing is very much connected to it. Israel is not really. There's no unique like evil there. No, that's not what it is. It's simply incentives. You have a much higher level of ethnic hate amongst Israelis and Palestinians than you do Russians and Ukrainians. You're going to see a different behavior from both sides. So I do think that's an important factor to mention. But then, how do you actually judge a moral army? Like, what does that look like? Adam, maybe you have some thoughts.
Abed wants to jump in. Yeah, Abed, please.
Thanks.
What's up, Abed?
What's up? Long time.
Love the flag.
Thank you. I hope we can get to that someday. Long time listener, and I really appreciate all the efforts you guys put in to make this happen. Just wanted to jump in about the idea of the IDF being like a moral army. I think it's a tricky subject. There are good arguments on both sides, but at the same time, I want to take us a few years back to when Gazans went on a protest around the border, the Great March of Return. I don't know all the facts on the top of my head, but I pulled up the Wikipedia page for that incident. So there you have like thousands of Palestinians and Gazans protesting for peace, protesting for to be heard without any rockets, without any or very little compared to what happened on October 7th, let's say. Nowhere near that. And Palestinians ended up with more than 13,000 people wounded. And the page says with more than 1,400 people struck by bullets 3 to 5 times. When there's that many people that are being harmed for protests, that gives a clear sign, at least to me, that when 35,000 people protested and you injured more than half of them.
You're talking about the March of Return?
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
Yeah. I have a little bit of a controversial take on the March of Return specifically. Clearly, I think that the way Israel dealt with that was horrible, but I don't think that 35,000 people walking towards a border can be called a peaceful protest, because there's no way to know what some percent will do if they cross the border. I think like a sovereign nation has the right to defend their border from a different population, whether that population is native to the land or not. It's still the sovereign nation's right to defend the border. So you have 35,000 people walking towards the border. You need to disperse them somehow. What Israel did, which is absolutely wrong, is they were literally just shooting people, and a lot of these people we know were underage or journalists. So we did see a lawlessness with that response, kind of like we've seen in Gaza. But I push back on the framing that the March of Return was simply a peaceful protest, because let's say 35,000 people get into Israel. Maybe only 10% want to take that opportunity to be violent. I mean, that's October 7th level of infiltration at that point, maybe even more, right? So
Sure. Yeah. Well, I would agree. Like, maybe it was wrong to call it like peaceful, but
most
at the end of the day, the scale was way over what what it should have been, and I think that applies to the way the IDF deals with Palestinians everywhere.
Right. Yeah.
So
There was a lot of unnecessary sniping then, for sure. There should have been a lot more,
Wait.
Yeah.
Adar,
It's a lose-lose situation.
It's a what now?
I said it's a lose-lose situation.
Mm.
Obviously, you can't let 35,000 people just cross over the border. Like you said, it's a sovereign nation. So it's a lose-lose. There's no right answer. What can you do? What Israel did was wrong also. So that's why I say it's a lose-lose situation.
Yeah.
So I haven't got deep into like the details of exactly what happened during March of Return. So I just know that from what I heard from people that do go much deeper into it, when you zoom in, it's not that clear cut exactly what they did. Maybe you guys know much better. My question for you is, I don't think this is published anywhere, but Adar, you have a sense of the Israeli firing protocols from having served.
Yeah, the firing protocols are very much what we're taught is they're done in a way to reduce harm. That's how we're taught. In practice, it's not always like that. So if you're guarding and somebody approaches you, you yell at them to stop. They keep walking, you yell at them to stop again. If they keep walking, you shoot in the air. They keep walking, you shoot at their legs. That's what we're taught. There's really given a lot of opportunity to not need to shoot somebody. In practice, not all soldiers are that strict, and very well might take a shot sooner than what the protocol taught us.
But what does that mean in terms of both, like, so let's just break it down in terms of like training, right? So like, is that what you're trained to do? And then what is the culture? And I suspect it might be like very specific to the unit.
It's really unit to unit, individual to individual, but you do have a lot of people that would just take the shot right away or much quicker. There are units that are doing that. Now, this is also what we saw in the West Bank. Gaza, in war, there's a lower level of consideration. There's a higher level of fear. In this instance, there's a higher level of hate and anger because of October 7th, and a lower, more lenient protocol for engaging in armed combat, to the point where it just really a lawlessness unlike which we've seen from the Israeli military. We've seen examples of it elsewhere, but this, what we saw in Gaza was a whole new level of lawlessness compared to other conflicts.
Yeah, just to kind of add, and it's a question actually on Adam's point. For example, in the Middle East, lots of countries have long lists of laws and regulations around women's rights, equalities, and things like that. And when it comes to practice, these are just like things on paper. So there are laws that exist, but barely being followed. And is it the case then, like at the IDF, where maybe there's a high level of leniency to soldiers breaking, for example, those trainings or things like that? Like I pulled up the casualties from that March on Return again. I agree. Like people are marching to the border.
I'm having a bit of trouble hearing you.
Is it now?
I think you might need to get some kind of a mic or speak much closer.
Okay, let me try that.
While he's trying that, I was just going to say, Adar, I appreciate the insight you just gave regarding the training. You know,
Yeah.
I didn't know that, but I kind of suspected it would go like that. Yeah.
Yeah. There's what we're taught, and then what's in practice. And one of the things that Israel and all militaries need to do, and I don't have knowledge on the internal workings of other militaries, but you do have a low level of accountability when these protocols are not followed in the IDF. So one way for the IDF to become more disciplined and thereby more moral, and again, I'm not sure moral is the right word to describe this, but if there was more discipline, there was a higher level of accountability, there would be less war crimes being committed, and Israel at that point would have a more moral military than.
But at least it shows that it's not systemic, like, because the other side always says that we're just out there, trying to kill every Palestinian that would, not we, but, the IDF is trying to kill every Palestinian that they could see. At least this shows that it's not systemic. Like, you're not trained to just shoot first, ask questions later,
The systemic nature is interesting because I don't know how high something needs to go in order for it to be systemic. So it's not coming from the very top, but if your battalion leader is just very lenient, and we do know there have been battalions that have been very lenient, if an entire battalion has a disregard for human life, is that then systemic? I think there's a case that it could be. I think it depends how we want to define systemic. But yeah, it's not coming from all the way above. We haven't seen any evidence of that.
Yeah. So is the audio better now?
Much better.
Yep.
Yeah. So you kind of answered part of that question that I had, but because I'm not so familiar with the IDF, I was thinking, just as an example, like in the Middle East, there are lots of countries with laws and regulations and all things written about how women's rights should be respected and equality and things like that. But on the ground, they're not being followed or they're not applied. So they're just laws written and on paper kind of thing. Like I pulled up the casualties from that Great March of Return. Now, I agree there are 30,000 people marching to the border, but you can use rubber bullets. You can use tear gas. You can use. So the casualties.
It should have been done with rubber bullets and tear gas. I'm in no way defending Israel, how Israel dealt with it. I just don't like the framing that this. I just don't think it can be described as peaceful because some amount had an intention to break through the fence.
Sure. I can agree with that. But like there were over 183 fatalities in that day, and you had 6,000 ammunition injuries.
Right.
Over 1,500 shrapnel injuries, and then the rubber bullets injuries were 400. So you can see there, like the scale of live ammunition compared to rubber bullets. And I'm just reading on the surface, and I know we're not going into all of the details, but that does not shout very moral to me. Or the most, or the best way to deal with things. And on the level of the IDF, that just like you described, Adar, and you might know this better, but like there could be laws and trainings on how to deal with people safely, but then they're not being followed on the level of the battalions or the individuals. And
correct.
And if they don't enforce it, having the law there is meaningless. Just like if you go to Egypt, you'll find long lists of laws around women's rights and equality and all great things, but on the ground, people don't even stop at the red light.
Right.
I think we have to look at it before October 7th, Adar. Did they enforce these things before October 7th?
So
more seriously than now? If a soldier broke protocol or something, would he be court-martialed?
Certainly, the protocol is followed more closely, not during war. So in the West Bank, it's definitely there's a closer following of that protocol. The times in the past when we've been in Gaza, the lenience of following that protocol reduced, and after October 7th, it was reduced to a level we haven't yet seen. So it does exist to a much higher extent in the West Bank, but there still is excesses and abuses. Not everybody follows that protocol, and the accountability in the West Bank is close to zero. So while it's not as bad, you still do have a problem there with how things are carried out. Adam, you wanted to?
Yeah. So I have a question. Why do you think it's so difficult for Israeli society to come to terms with the allegations and the accusations that those types of, let's say, firing protocols aren't being adhered to all that precisely? One thing that I think is interesting to me is the fact that so many Israelis have served in the army, right? So virtually in every family, you're going to find at least one or two that have served. If it was the case that each one of them had seen the kind of loose, just unstrict and relaxed kinds of standards that I think you're kind of quick to point out, wouldn't it be easier for Israeli society to come to terms with there being these types of like corrupting norms? But when I bring up these types of things, I say, well, look, what happens in situation X, Y, Z, and I bring it up. Virtually in every family dinner, there's going to be a few soldiers, a few people who had served, to say, well, what do you make of an entire list of scenarios where I feel like I put myself and my teams at risk in order not to harm civilians? Or when their commanders had told them, no, you're not allowed to use anything but the rubber bullets. And now they run out of rubber bullets and they say, tough luck. But you're out there and you're surrounded by people, but you cannot use live ammunition. Every Israeli soldier has stories like that. And if they don't, they have friends that can tell them stories like that. How do you reconcile that kind of reality with the reality of there being loose and like corrupting norms in the army? This is for anybody.
To me, I think it's pretty simple that because Israel does take precaution, anybody who served in the West Bank will have an example of that precaution. And they're more likely going to stress the precaution and not the excess, because we get very defensive of our military. So former IDF soldiers are much more likely to highlight and focus on the precautions being taken and not the excess of force being used. We do have breaking the silence, though, that is essentially soldiers who have decided to come out and speak about it. And I'll give an anecdote just to support this. My brother was an officer. He served in the West Bank, and he shared with me some stories of things he saw that weren't okay. He acknowledged they weren't okay. He'd never go public about this. He'd never speak about it in a forum that can then be used against Israel, right? So
no, but I'm saying, but wouldn't you expect that would introduce like an added sensitivity to hearing these kinds of allegations go public? If those allegations went public, like someone in your family would be like, yeah, I guess that makes sense.
But I'll tell you how it's rationalized. They're saying it's just war. This happens. There's some amount of war crimes in every war. Like that's what my brother currently is saying. When I brought to his attention, he says, yeah, it's war. It sucks, right? You could excuse any atrocity that way. It's not a good justification.
No, I know, but like I'm just saying, if you had an entire society that had been privy to that kind of excesses, they wouldn't be quick to say that the IDF is the most moral army. They would say, hey, it's an army and it's a war. But they don't say it. They say it's the most moral army. How do you make sense of that? Is it just propaganda, or just the fact that all of them had served some data?
No, I mean, the most moral army by default is propaganda because none of them have studied other militaries. It's based on nothing. It's a slogan that we like to say because we feel good about it. How could anybody say that with any degree of confidence had they not studied other militaries? So
I agree with you 100%. Like, it's propaganda.
Right. So that belief on its own, you've accepted the propaganda if you believe that, unless you actually investigated it, researched it, and reached a conclusion. That's not the people who believe Israel is the most moral army. They're told it They want to believe it. The world's against them. It's a good PR tactic, so they promote it. But I don't think that these conclusions are reached based because the information is provided to them. It's just something they're told, so they believe.
Can I just add? I think the government of Israel has had. I don't want to overgeneralize, but they've had a good 60, 70 year training in how to do propaganda well. In a sense of like how to play politics, how to be in the U.S. and be able to win votes over there, but also on things like war, where publicly on paper, on official announcements, you'd never hear officials saying genocidal or let's just say harsh wording. They would say it's the most moral army. But then once you start investigating, things could show up. And like, I know, Adam, you mentioned something along the lines of, what if like a soldier ran out of rubber bullets? So at that point, you're just left with live ammunition. But I think there could be a systemic aspect to this where from the top down, if you don't provide your troops with enough rubber bullets, they're going to run out at some point. And you could change the dial on that, where if you decrease it so that each soldier has one rubber bullet, you'll get more deaths. And if each soldier has 100 rubber bullets, you'll get less. So there is an aspect to play with over there, I think, as well.
I'm not convinced of the fullness of that logic. I think there's also something in deterrence, right? Like if everybody walks in and is just getting a slap on the wrist, that's one thing that might also incentivize. Many people in Israel think that the Israeli army is notoriously and deliberately and corruptedly too lenient with its treatment of terrorists and of bad actors, and that's why it is kind of.
But that's a position that we only hear on like the Israeli right wing, and then the like very fringe non-Israelis believe that. Like that's not a.
Well, I think non-fringe believe it with respect to the prison system. Okay. That they're getting. It's such a good deal. Just be a terrorist.
Although our prison system now has taken a turn ever since Ben Gvir's been in charge of it.
But for many years that has.
Can you expand on that, Adam? I'm not familiar with what you mean.
I want to I want to make one more quick point before Adam. I'm thinking of more examples of like you're pointing to like a dissonance people have, how they could believe that it's the most moral army in the world while acknowledging that there's war crimes. I actually think this is pretty regular human behavior, right? If we were to ask most people in the world what country is the best country in the world, most people would say it's their country. For whatever reason, they just happen to be born in the best country in the world. It's not that they actually went to all the other countries. They didn't study this. They just genuinely believe that their country's the best. And then you could point to the fact that, look at all this poverty, look at this corruption, look at this. They'll be like, yeah, that's fine, but that exists everywhere. We're still the best. So I think it's a very similar psychology to how we view this.
I like that example. I agree.
Anyways, yeah, Adam, did you want to go deeper on?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly what the. I don't know. I mean, I just know that I had heard this many, many, many times. It's not like they go into much detail, but they say, look how well the terrorists are being treated in our prisons, right? They get stipend, they get money, they come in, they get their housing for free, they play video games all day, they get to do whatever they want. And then while these are people with blood on their hands, right? Instead of giving them capital punishment, some of these people have killed people. Instead of giving them capital punishment, you go and you house them at government expense and they're getting incredibly lenient treatment. And of course, it makes a lot of sense why people would want to be terrorists, because you get such excellent conditions.
I would suggest.
Yeah.
I would suggest. I don't know if you've seen this documentary. It's called "Where the Olive Trees Weep." Are any of you guys familiar with it?
No.
Where or when? What do you call it?
Where the Olive Trees Weep. It's a really good documentary. I found out about it recently. It's available for free online as well.
Nice.
You can click through the payment page and you can select like I want to get it for free, and they can give it for you for free, or you can put a donation. But it sheds some really good light on the prison system and prisoners. Now, again, like as a Palestinian, I'd be biased on that, but I think the documentary puts things in perspective. It's an Israeli documentary.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I was just gonna mention that. Didn't I read somewhere that Yahya Sinwar was like treated in the prison and for cancer or something like that, and they saved his life?
Yeah, Israeli doctor saved Yahya Sinwar's life.
I mean, why would they even do that? If you know what I mean, wouldn't they want him to die of cancer, and this way they could just sweep it under the rug that he died of natural causes or whatever and wasn't killed? So, I mean, if they saved his life, that already tells me something. It just doesn't make sense.
Unless they brought him in for brain surgery, put a chip in his brain in order to control him, convinced him to plan October 7th, only for Israel to then start a war on many fronts, destroy Gaza, destroy Hezbollah, attack Iran, right? It's all this 60 chess.
Sounds plausible.
That'd be interesting,
right? Should we? Yeah, I mean these are good examples of Israel as a matter of policy taking care of their enemy, for certain. I think it's interesting because when somebody does something really bad, can we point at something good they did to kind of cancel those two things out? I'm not sure it works that way. I think it is important to be nuanced about the good and the bad, but generally our judgment needs to be assessed on the actual harm a military's causing while that harm could have been avoided. Like at the end of the day, we could talk about like protocols and policy, and all this is important and relevant, but we can't disregard the actual impact of one's actions. So Michael Newman said if they have more comprehensive moral orders than others, then they're objectively the most moral army. So I think there's a few challenges with saying that. If they have more comprehensive moral orders, then you could say that they're more moral than those who have less comprehensive orders. But to say if they have more comprehensive moral orders than others, then they're objectively the most moral, I don't see how that conclusion can be reached. But I also don't think that
but Adar, it's how much does what you tell yourself matter here? So does the fact that Israelis forget about whether or not they manifest morality through their actions, does the fact that they are so concerned as to brand themselves as the most moral and to set protocols that are moral,
no, I mean, to me that shows that they're concerned about what the world thinks about them.
But you think that is that really what you think is going on? I actually think it's deeper than that. It could be the case that there's some self-delusion. It could be it could still be propaganda.
I actually think somebody told me.
Let me ask you, Adar, why is this the propaganda that is used not just outside? I understand why you might want to say this outside. Why is this the kind of propaganda that would work domestically?
So that's the thing. I'm personally not even hearing that conversation domestically. So I'd be interested in hearing your experience with that, because I don't really see Israelis talking about that amongst themselves. To me, it seems to be used as really just propaganda. But just to contend with what Michael said, if we want to judge a country's morality by how strict their rules of engagement is, then that's okay. I don't think that's the right metric, but then we would need to look at other rules of engagement and see who really cares the most for civilians, and that would be the most moral army. I don't think that the fact that Israel has a stricter laws of engagement than others means they're by default the most moral. I think we need to really assess that. But I think the more important point is, it's not just the code of conduct or laws of engagement, it's actual actions. Let's say you have the strict laws of engagement out of any military, but your soldiers are constantly just not following that. They're committing war crimes and there's no accountability. Are you still the most moral army in the world? Why don't actions matter? You know?
Yeah, thanks for saying that. Like I was just gonna say that it makes a big difference. Like from a Western perspective, a lot of Westerners in the U.S. or Europe have a different perspective on society, and I think laws are much more adhered to over there, or people have like put laws on a much higher ground compared to like places like in the Middle East, where it's very easy to see somewhere that has all the laws, but they're not being applied as much. So if you think about this issue from a Western lens, you'd be easily you could easily fall under the impression that these laws are all being applied, because in your day-to-day life, every law is being applied, or almost all of them, or much more than other places.
And
do we want to move this to the after party? Do we want to move this to Discord? I see
we'll
we
do
have David here as well, waiting to hop on.
Oh, nice. I do want to ask Abed, sorry, one last question though, before we do that.
Sure. David, real quick, David, I see you're here. We're gonna wrap it up, but please join the after party. We'd love to hear from you there.
Yeah, we're gonna keep going. We're gonna keep going on Discord, and we have the link.
Yeah, let me drop a link for everybody to join. Yeah, I'll drop a link, and then people can start joining, and then you could ask Abed the final question.
I think I see a bunch of people still on the Discord talking already. I mean, when we
I was
started.
just going to add one more thing before I go, if I could.
Al, real quick. So everybody, I dropped a Discord link. There's also a link to this in the actual description, but you will see once you join Discord on the left-hand side, there's different rooms. So click on the live stream after party, and that's where we're going to take the after party. Adam, I'm going to hop off to run to the bathroom, but you could finish up the stream here.
Yeah, if I could just say, I was just going to say, if we took the suicide bombings out of the equations completely, let's say they didn't exist, I think that would also play a role in how the soldiers treat others, because if you're a U.S. soldier on the border of Mexico, you're not going to even think about the guy coming next to you and blowing himself up. You know what I mean?
Right.
So you're going to treat him a little differently, But if you don't know what this guy is going to do, does he have a bomb, and you're already, suspicious before anything even happens. So I think that also plays into it. That I wish that suicide bombing was not even in the vocabulary or in the dictionary. I wish they know about it. It didn't exist.
Yeah.
I think that would play a big role in how they treat others.
I think that's an excellent point. I think that the nature of the threat that Israelis feel is relevant to the evaluation of their actions.
Correct. Yeah.
I think that's right. With all of this being said, though, Abed, you, if I remember right, you said you're Palestinian. Is that right?
Yep.
When you hear any discussion over Israel being, forget about most moral army, but moral at all, what does that does that trigger? How do you parse this? How does that sound like to you as a Palestinian?
Yeah, like as a first impression, when you first hear it does trigger a negative reaction. Maybe partially because all the things that you hear growing up, or whatever they are, or the environment that you grew up in, or listening to stories from my grandparents and all of that. But at the same time, I always take a step back and I try to evaluate that statement. Like, not take it at face value as much as possible, and try to look into it, because I also like to question question things before I take them up as fact, and maybe that's partially why I ended up with an avatar with this kind of flag. But yeah, it does trigger a negative reaction. All the immediate reaction I get is just seeing all those photos and videos of children getting hurt. But at the same time, I don't let that control me. At the end of the day, I try to investigate it. But I do think it's not wholly accurate, and we have to be straight up with ourselves. Like, propaganda is real, and if you live in a country, you're gonna think it's the best country in the world. It's the most.
But when you hear soldiers, I'm sure you've heard soldiers say, "Look, I don't mean any harm to anybody. We're just trying to defend ourselves, and we're trying to do it in the most ethical way possible." And that's my experience, and the experience of people in my team, and that's what we've been taught, and that's what we wish to implement. And so when you hear Israeli soldiers say things like that, which I'm sure you've heard, how do you like reconcile what you see in your experience through your eyes, the kind of destruction, that you've sort of like grown up witnessing or kind of being privy to, with sentiments like this from actual soldiers? Like, how does that make sense to you?
On the surface, I actually would love for that to be true, and I do like understand that there are people that could be lone actors who do negative things in the army. If that's generally what you guys are being taught, I would generally say, like, more power to you. If that's actually what you want to do, and you're not just repeating what's being said without like thinking about it critically, more power to you. Please, let's make this more like less harmful and less violent, and because I think that will pave a path to better relationships and hopefully peace one day. Does that answer your question?
I think it's 75% of the way there. I think I could grill you a little bit more to get some more, some more juice there. But maybe we could. Can we do that on the in the after party? Are you sticking around for that? Okay. Nice.
Awesome. I will drop the link again. When you join Discord, on the left-hand side, you'll see it says live stream after party. Click there and you will be connected. You don't need to show your face. You don't need to speak. You could just listen in like you're doing now, but you're also welcome to come and share. And I think we decided, so Adam and I are going to have this live stream every week, but I'm going to try to do an additional 2 live streams every week. So we're really going to up the streaming. So if any of the viewers or listeners have felt like you want more of this content, well, more of this content is coming, so stay tuned. And I don't know when the next one will be, but it will be sometime this weekend. So I will stay tuned. I will let you all know. Anyways, much love. Talk soon.
Thank you.